Lift your hearts and strength once more. Soon your boat will come ashore. Lift your hearts and strength once more. Soon your boat will come ashore. Lift your hearts and strength once more. Soon your boat will come ashore. Lift your hearts and strength once more.
Good morning.
These readings are from the book Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week's reading, week 34. How should we meet our tests? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Last week, we considered Satan's temptation of Jesus in the wilderness after his baptism by John. We discussed the question, does Satan exist? All of us experience temptation of one kind or another in our lives. Some of us frequently, others only occasionally. Whether temptation comes to us from our own subconsciousness or from outside ourselves is secondary to the fact that it does come and that we must deal with it. More important, then, is the question, how to deal with it, and in fact, how to deal with tests of any kind. Martin Luther flung an inkpot at the devil, who had appeared to test him. A dark stain on the wall of Luther's cell is pointed out to tourists in support of this story. Unfortunately, our trials are not often so summarily dismissed. As a fellow monk once said to Swami Kriyananda, speaking of Satan, "If only I could get my hands on him." Jesus, during his temptations in the wilderness, overcame them and thereby set an example for all time by clinging the more determinedly to God. As Paramhansa Yogananda used to say, darkness cannot be driven out of a room with a stick. Once you turn on the light, however, the darkness will vanish as though it had never been. Jesus manifested this principle. The Bible tells us, therefore, that at last the devil leaveth him, and behold, angels came and ministered unto him. In the Bhagavad Gita, the point is clarified further by the added explanation that there are three qualities in human nature: sattvic, or spiritual elevating; rajasic, or ego activating; and tamasic, or spiritually darkening. It is this triune aspect of human nature that the third chapter refers to with the words, "As fire is hidden by smoke, as a mirror is dulled by rust, and as an embryo is enclosed in the womb, so is the indwelling self enveloped by desire." Yogananda explained that each of these examples describe one of the qualities or gunas. Sattva guna, that which elevates our consciousness, can be freed by any identity with the ego by a little puff of meditation and right affirmation. Rajoguna, which embroils the ego in restless activity, can be worked off with a little more and longer effort. tamo guna, embracing as it does such mental states such as laziness and stupidity, can only be outgrown in time, since it inhibits even the desire for self-improvement. The example Jesus gave us was intended more for those in whom sattva guna is prominent. But if you yourself find elements in your consciousness that resist even the effort to cling to God in prayer and meditation, don't despair. Patience, as it has long been well said, is the fastest path to God. As long as your efforts take you steadily in the right direction, you will come out right in time. Remember Yogananda's words, a saint is a sinner who never gave up. If, however, your nature impels you, even against your will, to move in the wrong direction towards egoic desires and away from God, strive at least to detach yourself mentally from your wrong actions, which are induced by habit. The time will come when of their own stored up energy will tire and diminish. At that time, if you have not contributed to that energy by your consenting will, you will find it possible at last to redirect your energies more constructively. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om.
So in honor of our affirmation today, I have to ask, how is everybody? Yay.
Alert.
Oh, it worked. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming today. For those of you who don't know us, my name is Nayaswami Gangamata. This is my husband, Daiva. It's our joy to be here. We have returned from being gone for a couple of weeks. We went down to Ananda Village for what they call their Spiritual Renewal Week. It happens every year, second or third week of August, and it's exactly what the word means. It's a week of spiritual renewal. If you can, I believe the talks are now on their website, they're online. Wonderful talks. There's always a series of talks every morning, culminating with a beautiful Sunday service. Was that just last weekend? It was. Wow, time flies. To be alert here. Wonderful talk by Jyotish and Devi, the spiritual directors of Ananda Worldwide. They were basically saying goodbye to everyone because they were leaving for their yearly regular trip over to Italy and India. They'll be gone till the second week in December. They gave a wonderful talk, so tune into that if you can. I'd like to begin with a reading from Whispers from Eternity. This is Yogananda's book of prayer demands and poems. It's a beautiful book. And as you can see, we always have lots of bookmarks because you never know which one to pick sometimes. But I think this is perfect for this morning. This is number 217, and it's called A Prayer. And this is a prayer that Yogananda received after a great test of God. In disease or in health, in success or in failure, in poverty or in prosperity, in joy or in sorrow, in disaster or in safety, in life or in death, I stand immutably, unalterably, unshakably loyal, devoted, and firmly loving Thee, my Heavenly Father, forever, and forever, and forever. Om. Peace. Amen. This powerful prayer really captures the essence of our topic this morning. And if we were to go around the room and ask, what is your current test? We would probably get a variety of answers because life is so varied and complex, right? Is it on a physical level? Maybe you're struggling with your health. Is it on a financial level? Maybe you don't have enough money, or maybe you have too much money. I don't know. Or maybe it's in relationship to others, maybe at work or at home or to yourself. The answers would be quite varied, I'm sure. But the one common answer that we would probably find is that nobody is exempt from a test, right? I was remembering many, many years ago, in fact, we've been up here 12 and a half years. And 6 months before we were scheduled to move up here, I was having a landmark birthday, and I decided I really wanted to do something out of the box. I wanted to test myself. I always loved hiking. I had gone into backpacking and hiking, and I had a lovely group of lady friends when I lived at Ananda Village, and we did that regularly. But a group of us decided we're going to take 8 weeks off that summer. We're going to go hike a good portion of what's called the Pacific Crest Trail, especially the John Muir Trail, because we were going to start up at Tahoe and end at Mount Whitney, which is a pretty high peak, and we were going to climb it and celebrate. And so we had been planning for a whole year. Many of you know how I like to plan. We're planning for a pilgrimage now. We've been meeting monthly for a year. I do the same thing in many things that I do in life. So here we were planning. When you're planning an 8-week hike like this through a vast amount of land or area, you really do have to plan ahead of time, meaning you plan your food, you mail it out to the different post offices along the way. You do a lot of research, what the trail is going to be like, and so the 4 or 5 friends of us, we would meet regularly, and we had our guidebooks, and we would scour through them and read through them. But as we were getting closer to our departure date, little tests were coming up for everybody. You know, somebody, this was going to be a very physical trip. Somebody hurt her foot, like she just dropped something on her foot, like, oh my gosh, why did this happen? I'm leaving in 3 weeks. I don't know if I can hike. Somebody else, all of a sudden, her boss was saying, you know, I don't think you can go. We have this big project. And on. Somebody else, because of family responsibilities, didn't know if she could go. And then a friend really sweetly looked at me and she said, how come you're not having any tests? And I just kind of shrugged my shoulders. I don't know. Well, wouldn't you know, I think it was just the next day, and I look at Daiva because he's involved in this, maybe it was the next day or not even more than 2 days, that we were building a house at the time near Ananda Village. He was the contractor, and we had a big crew. We were building this beautiful house. And for some reason that day, I was not at the job site. I was there every day, helping out. I did a lot of the errands into town, getting the supplies we needed, and whatever else support. But he calls me, and I said, hi, how's it going? It was a Friday afternoon, and he said, you know, I just got bit by a rattlesnake. I go, wow. And he said, you know, we had a little clinic near Ananda Village. He goes, you know, I think I'm going to go to the clinic. And I go, you know, I think you should go to the hospital. He's like, no, I'm going to go to the clinic. I go, okay. And so then we hang up, and then he calls me back not too soon. He goes, you know, they want me to go to the hospital. I go, okay, I'll meet you there. Fortunately, he had somebody to drive him there, and I met him there, and many of you know the result. He did end up losing his finger. It was quite a journey. But I didn't leave for my trip as planned. You know, I couldn't. How could I leave? You know, the first 2 weeks were really, even after he lost his finger, he had to keep his hand up. He was like this for 2 weeks on the job site, and it was his right hand. He couldn't write and everything, and he needed somebody to help him during the job. But then that very same friend, she so sweetly, she came up to me. She said, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, don't worry, you didn't, you know, not to worry. You know, nobody's exempt. We never know. Or it's that saying, we always think the grass is greener somewhere else. But what are these tests that we're trying to meet? It's not the soul that's being tested, right? Because the soul is a perfect reflection of God. We are joy, we are love, calmness, kindness, we're alertness, we're energy. But what? It's the ego that's being tested, right? And to the extent that we're being tested, it's because we're in that limited state of consciousness for that moment, right? So then we're tested. And that's why we say we welcome these tests. I always wondered why, especially at Ananda, we say we welcome tests because they're opportunities for us to break through those limitations, right? To break through those barriers. We are joy, we are kindness, we are love, we're all those qualities of spirit. And it's so wonderful, you know, every week as we plan for these services, we always ask, okay, what's the topic? What's the affirmation? It's really fun to see the affirmation that's connected to the topic. And it's alertness, okay? What do you need to have to be alert? You need to have energy, right? And what happens when you have energy and a test comes, right? You feel like you can conquer it, right? When you have that energy, when you've had your Wheaties that morning, right? You feel like you can meet the test, right? And so that's why we talk about how important it is to have energy on the path. That's why we learn the energization right away. So we have that alertness, that enthusiasm, that energy to sit in meditation to experience that stillness. But what else happens when we have that alertness and we have that energy, right? We can feel that we can conquer that test. Yes, we feel that we're awake and ready. But then our consciousness also increases, right? We can say, okay, so what's trying to happen here? Okay, why is this test happening? We can look for the bigger picture, right? And sometimes we may not get the answer right away. Why did this happen? Why did I have to start my trip 2 weeks late? Okay, I got an answer, actually, but we can ask that question, and we may not always know the answer, why that's happening, but it helps us have that bigger perspective. And then perhaps we can even look back in time and look at all of our other tests and see that, wow, golly, you know what? I think they were a blessing in disguise, right? They brought me to where I am right now. But the beautiful thing, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but the beautiful thing about going through a test is that we can know that we're being held. We're actually being held, right? We're being loved by Divine Mother, by God. There's a true story of a devotee of Yogananda that was an avid climber of the high peaks, the high mountains. And he went out on a really steep climb, I think it was in the Alps. And he went up, and then all of a sudden he found himself at a point where he realized, he couldn't go down anymore. So often when you go up these steep climbs, I'm told, I haven't done them, that you can't really go down. You have to just keep going up. And he found himself at that point, but when he looked to see what was next, there was this huge ledge or overhang, right? And he realized, oh my gosh, how am I going to get over this? This is a big test. And he sat there and he prayed. And he realized if he just stayed there, he would have just froze. He would have the ending would not have been a good ending, but he realized he had to try. So what's another way that we can meet our tests is what? Step by step, by trying. So he said, okay, I'm going to try and get over that ledge. And he tried, and he couldn't. And he tried, and he couldn't, right? And he tried 25 times. I don't know if I've got all the details right, but the essence of the story, it was the 25th time, okay? He kept trying, and then as he tried to go over, what happened? He felt a hand holding him. He felt a force holding him and helped him get over that ledge. And how are we going to know that force? How are we going to know that hand unless we're sometimes put in those situations, right? So then we can know, my gosh, God is really there. A dear friend of ours, her father just passed away just the other night. And during that night, her mother had this feeling or this vision or this dream, I don't know what the right word is to describe it, but she felt a hand holding her hand, and then she knew she was going to be all right because she knew her spouse was passing. She knew that this change was coming. It's in those moments, I don't know why, we have to be taken to our knees, but we need that full alert attention. We need to have our consciousness fully living in every moment. Yogananda said, read my poem Samadhi if you want to know my consciousness. Read it every day. I, the cosmic sea, watching the little ego floating in me. The little ego just floating in me, but I, the cosmic sea. For that reminder, that awareness, God is always with us. I was up late last night, it was hot and whatever, but I was looking for a joke and I couldn't, I wanted a new joke. But I've had this one I've told a lot, but it fits really perfectly with this. The prayer that the man, we forget to reach out. And the man is just praying to God, dear God, so far so good. I haven't hurt anyone's feelings. I haven't been grumpy or selfish or greedy, or we can fill in, right, whatever. But in a few minutes, I'm going to be getting out of bed, and I'm going to need a lot more help. We forget to ask for that help, but the masters, they're here to help us. Okay, and these tests, so-called tests, they're here for us to grow ever more deeply in our consciousness, in our awareness with them. So we have a blessing. I promised I would only talk for 10 minutes, but we have the blessing of being on this path, having the support of each other. Let's support each other. Let's love God, and remember how blessed we are in our lives. And thank you, everyone. Whoops.
Very nice. Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure where to go. We never talk with each other about what we're going to say. So it's always a little bit of a surprise to find out what the story is for that day. The extended version of this is we get asked when we speak at Spiritual Renewal Week, which is Ananda Worldwide's gesture now because of Dwapara Yuga and because of the digital age, it's actually Ananda's gesture to the world of spiritual regeneration. And a group of people speak each year. And when you're invited to speak, you're given the topic, the basic topic they ask you to speak about a month or two in advance. And I recall every year it's a bit of an adventure, but this year I thought, great, I can get this. And I prayed, what is it you would like to have said? And by the time Spiritual Renewal Week came, I'd been just ruminating on the topic for a couple of months and just feeling it out. It was how to be an emissary for Yogananda's joy, for God's joy into this world. That's a great topic. Let's see where we can go with that. So by the time the week came, I was fairly comfortable with the talk that I felt like was trying to be given. And if you watch my talk this year, you'll hear the same story. But the first person stood up and they essentially gave my talk. I realized it was kind of a stupid prayer in the sense that I asked not what did God want to say through me, but what did he want said. So, you have to work on refinements of prayer. So I went home that day and I thought, Master. In fact, there's a cute story about a minister, an assistant minister who the day before Sunday was asked by the minister to give the talk for the first service. And he said, but it's so late, what will I say? And the senior minister said, don't worry, God will provide. And he just sweated all night long. Morning came and he's going into service and he doesn't know what he's going to say. He hasn't got it put together. And he sees some paper blowing across the church lawn. And he goes over and he grabs it, going to clean up. And he looks at it. It's the senior minister's talk for that day. So he goes in, and he was right. God provided. So he goes in and he gives the talk. Well, the senior minister's sitting in there. He goes. And afterwards, the senior minister comes to him and says, that was my talk. What am I going to do now? And he says, God will provide. Day 2 came, and I was ready with another talk. I didn't talk till Saturday. It's part of there's a blessing and a curse in being toward the end. Yeah. Even today. We get tested in everything. How are we going to take it? So day 2 came, and I had prayed, and I felt like I had another good talk, and sure enough, a person gave that talk that day. And it worked its way down till Saturday morning. It was our panel was up there, and I was fairly confident about the talk that I would give, and I felt like, oh, finally, here we are. Master, thank you. And the first man stood up, and he gave my talk. Anyway, so, it's an interesting question. I realize that the real question that's on the table, we are, every one of us, and the Masters come to remind us, and Swami came to remind us, we are omnipresent. We are the entire ocean of consciousness. Gangamata referred to it in the poem Samadhi. I, the cosmic sea. I, the cosmic sea, the entire ocean of consciousness. I'm watching this little ego playing this thing out. If we have not recaptured that experience of being the cosmic sea, then all we have is the little egoic experience. And the drama of God in creation is for all these little fragments of his consciousness to be playing out all these little stories. And the stories to be fascinating. Swami Kriyananda, the founder of Ananda, for those who are new, and a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, he would talk about, because he was a playwright and he was an author, he wrote 140 some odd books, and he would talk about, nobody would read a book if it started off, once upon a time there was a boy who was born on the right side of the tracks, and he got a great job, and he married the boss's daughter, and they had lots and lots of money and no problems ever, and then he died. I mean, you get into it about that far and you just go to sleep. But if he's born on the wrong side of the tracks and he has to work his way through school and he barely makes it, and then by dint of good fortune and magnetism he gets a good job, and the boss kind of likes him, but then he falls in love with the boss's daughter, and the boss doesn't want a lowly worker marrying his daughter, and he finally has to pretty soon we're on the edge of our seats. We're riveted to it. That's God's play. We are made in the image of God. That's the dream. There's this constant dynamic story trying to unfold that's fascinating, at least to God. And if we want to be fascinated, we have to grow up. The tests that come, what is a test? Again, Gangamata started to address it, but what is a test? It's a place where we can't feel God's joy. It's a place where we lose connection with our source. That's all. And we're left feeling just this little tiny isolated piece of consciousness that's got no connection to the larger story. And there are small tests. There are tests like, oh my gosh, they took my talk. There are larger tests like, my husband got bit by a rattlesnake and I can't go on the hike. There are tests that are lifelong, just character traits or physical traits that just carry us through a life where we are up against it. I was watching the Olympics. We took a couple days after Spiritual Renewal Week with our daughter and son-in-law, and he's a very avid sportsman, and so we had the Olympics on. Has anybody not seen Simone Biles? You should look it up. This is a young woman, 4'9". 4'9", who can do things with her physical body that are absolutely unheard of. She launches herself through floor routines. She's a gymnast, through floor routines that defy gravity. I mean, it gives legitimacy to levitation. She's well on her way, and she's so composed. It's so not a big thing. It's what she does. And you see her companions and compatriots and peers, and you can see them aspiring. But when she does it, there's just no sense of effort. She's just in a superconscious flow. And that's the story. There was a little parallel track that showed up. I think it was on YouTube or something. But it showed Olympics gymnastics 50 years ago and Olympics gymnastics now. And it had the pommel horse then and now. It had the parallel bars then and now. It had the floor routines then and now. It had the uneven bars then and now. And, back 50 years ago, people were making a great effort just to get around the bar a time or two. Now they flip around them and do somersaults off of one and land on the other. We're in a different age. We're in an age of energy, and you can see people beginning to respond to that age of energy. And when we're in an energetic flow, it just feels so natural to be doing impossible things that the human body and human mind couldn't possibly do. That's the call of this age. That's the call of this time. And all tests, again, as Gangamata referred, if you have the energy to address something, it's not a test. It's just an event. But if you don't have the energy, then the darkness, it starts to close in. It starts to crush our consciousness. And the answer always, the answer under every single circumstance is always the same. The solution to a test is always the same. It's to get back in touch with the source. It's to get back in touch and reconnect so that energy, that light, that joy can flow through us. I grew up in the last part of Kali Yuga. Really, the momentum of where I grew up was Kali Yuga. It was very dense and very heavy and very form-driven. And I'm aware that things are moving so fast that it gets a little dizzying for me periodically. And I realized that unless I ground back in, unless I restore myself on a regular and daily basis, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. It's easy to feel crushed. The planet is changing. The environment is changing. Energy concerns, economic concerns, overpopulation concerns, new digital advances concerns. I mean, just trying to catch up with any one part of it is overwhelming. And it's easy to start to go to sleep. It's easy to want to turn off the lights and kind of allow the energy to implode and for the test to overcome us. But this is also a time of enormous possibility, enormous promise, and enormous potential. And that capacity to have access to the energy that it takes to meet life is increasing. And these masters, they came, and they brought the very techniques to give us the power to be in that flow, to meet life and not be overwhelmed by it, but to meet it and have it flow through us like it flows through Simone Biles and some of these other incredible physical athletes. And it's not about the physical. I mean, it's so obvious to use a physical expression. But you see these great souls where there's no resistance. I have a great story. I have somebody I'd like to introduce. Erin, would you come up? This is Erin Vanaco. She is from our East Coast Center. And she has just moved here to be a part of Living Wisdom School's staff and team. She's living out at Ananda Center at Laurelwood. And she just arrived 2 days ago?
Wednesday night.
Wednesday night, so 4 nights ago. So I'd like to have everybody just welcome her. And it was very sweet. We met at Spiritual Renewal because she went there and then came up here. And so we had lunch together, and she was telling the story of getting here. She drove from the East Coast. And, if you're sincere on the path, God makes sure that you're well tested. He checks to see how sincere you are. When I moved to Ananda Village, it took 12 hours to go 45 miles. Okay? Hers was a little different story, but one of the things that she shared with us is she and her mother drove out to... you were out to South Dakota, and then her mother flew back, and so she's on her own, and she's got her stuff, and it's day 4, day 5. She drives to Montana thinking, I will just stop at the first campsite I find. I'm exhausted. I can't wait to get to Yellowstone, and I'm just going to... Well, she gets to the first campsite. What happened?
It was fall.
And she's exhausted and about to fall over.
I'll just keep driving. I got this.
Okay, and then what happened?
The next one was fall.
And then?
So I pulled up, and I was like, well, let me just ask the ranger. Maybe he'll know if there's another one that's open. So I pull up, and I asked him, and he's like, I can tell you, they're all full. It's just that overwhelm, just exhausted, and so totally out of my... I start sobbing. I've been driving for so long, and I'm exhausted. I don't know what to do, and I'm all on my own, and so the ranger comes and he said, hang on a second. Takes care of somebody else, and he comes over, and he takes...
Just a second. I'm not sure that what we're recommending is that you sob every time it gets stopped. When you can't help it.
It was completely out of my control at that point. I did not see that coming. Because I was like, oh, I can do this. I was determined to muscle through and find a solution, but God took over, and he came around, takes one look at my car, and he saw a picture of Yogananda, and he said, oh, you know Paramahansa Yogananda? And I was just sobbing at this point. I'm like, oh my God, thank you. I was like, yeah, Yogananda. And turns out he had spent some time at Swami's Beach in California and in San Diego, and was familiar with Yogananda. He's like, all right, hang on a second. He kindly gave me a group site at a discount and allowed me to stay there and work it out. So it's Guru's grace.
That was only one of the stories.
Yeah, one of them.
By the time she got here, the last one was, gosh, we're so glad you came to join our team, but we don't have the hours for you. And she just looked over and says, okay. When we don't have resistance, when we don't feel that what's happening is something other than God's way and God's grace, when we just open ourselves to the flow of life and energy, things resolve themselves often in ways we couldn't possibly have imagined. And always, you will find, always, always, always is for the best. It's always for our benefit. It's always to help fulfill that awakening process that is the only thing that will ever give us what we're looking for. So we're going to just bless you and thank you for being here and for the courage and to not only start, but to actually come all the way through. It is just beginning. Let's stand up and just let's send 3 ohms and welcome her to the family. Directly to the one solution that we need under all circumstances.